I never thought my own daughter-in-law would try to kill me. At 77 years old, you think you've seen everything life can throw at you. You're wrong. Subscribe to the channel for more stories like this and comment the city you're watching from. It started 3 months ago, right after Ashley moved in with my son David following their wedding. Every Sunday, she insisted on cooking dinner for the family. Such a sweet gesture, everyone said. What a caring wife she was, making sure Grandpa got a home-cooked meal. But something was wrong, terribly wrong. The first time it happened, I blamed it on my age. Nausea, dizziness, stomach cramps that lasted for hours after dinner. Ashley would hover over me with such concern, rubbing my back and suggesting I see a doctor. David would look worried and ask if I needed to go to the hospital. Just something I ate, I'd say, not wanting to cause a fuss. I'll be fine by morning. And I always was. By Monday, I felt perfectly normal again. Strong enough to tend my garden, clear enough to read my books, steady enough to drive to the grocery store. It was only on Sundays that I felt like death warmed over. The second time, I mentioned it to Dr. Morrison during my regular checkup. He ran every test imaginable. Blood work, urine samples, even an MRI of my brain. Everything came back normal. Perfect health for a man my age, he said. Maybe I was developing food sensitivities. It happens as we get older. I started paying closer attention to what I ate on Sundays. Ashley always prepared my plate herself, bringing it to me with such a loving smile. She'd watch me take the first few bites, her eyes bright with what I thought was affection. When I complimented her cooking, she'd beam with pride and insist I finish every bite. "You're too skinny, Grandpa Mike," she'd say, using that sweet nickname that made David's face light up. "You need your strength." By the fourth Sunday dinner, a terrible suspicion began forming in my mind. A suspicion so awful I tried to push it away, but the pattern was too clear to ignore. I only got sick after eating Ashley's cooking. Never when David cooked, never when we ordered takeout, never when I prepared my own meals. Only when Ashley served me food. I started making mental notes. The way she always insisted I sit in the same chair. How she'd disappear into the kitchen alone to finish up before bringing out the plates. The strange little smile she'd get when I started feeling unwell. And most telling of all, how she'd suggest I lie down in the guest room instead of going home when the symptoms hit, like she wanted me to stay close, like she needed to monitor my condition. The breakthrough came on a rainy Sunday in October. Ashley had prepared what she called her special pot roast, the same dish that had made me violently ill the week before. I'd been dreading this dinner all day, but I couldn't figure out how to avoid it without raising suspicions. As usual, she brought my plate directly to me while David was in the living room checking football scores. I was about to take my first bite when nature called. I excused myself and headed toward the bathroom, but something made me pause at the kitchen doorway. Ashley was standing at the counter with her back to me, David's plate and her own still waiting to be served. She had her purse open beside her and was holding a small amber bottle, the kind prescription medications come in. As I watched, frozen in disbelief, she carefully twisted off the cap and shook something into my plate. Not David's plate, not her own plate, mine. She stirred the contents gently with my fork, then quickly closed the bottle and dropped it back into her purse. The whole process took maybe 15 seconds. 15 seconds that changed everything. I backed away silently and went to the bathroom, my hands shaking as I gripped the sink. My 26-year-old daughter-in-law was poisoning me, slowly, methodically, week after week. The sweet girl who called me Grandpa Mike and worried about my health was systematically trying to kill me. But why? I stayed in the bathroom longer than necessary, trying to process what I'd witnessed. When I finally returned to the dining room, Ashley was already seated, her face glowing with that familiar bright smile. "There you are, Grandpa Mike. Your dinner's getting cold." I looked down at my plate. The pot roast looked perfectly normal, smelled delicious. You'd never suspect it contained whatever poison Ashley had added from that little amber bottle. "Thank you, sweetheart," I said, my voice surprisingly steady. "It looks wonderful." David joined us, chatting about the game while cutting into his roast. Ashley ate hers with obvious enjoyment, occasionally glancing at me to make sure I was eating too. I pushed the food around my plate, taking tiny bites and hiding most of it under my napkin when she wasn't looking. "Not very hungry tonight?" Ashley asked, her voice tinged with what sounded like disappointment. "Just tired," I replied, "but it's delicious. Your best pot roast yet." Her smile returned. "I'm so glad you like it. I put extra love into this one." Extra poison, more likely. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling of my bedroom, my mind racing. Ashley was trying to kill me, but I had no proof beyond what I'd witnessed. Even if I told David, would he believe me? His wife, the woman he loved, was a would-be murderer. And what was her motive? What did she gain from my death? The answer hit me like a physical blow. My house. The 3-bedroom craftsman I'd owned for 42 years, now worth nearly $400,000 in today's market. David was my only heir, and when I died, everything would go to him. And what belonged to David would belong to his wife. Ashley wasn't just trying to kill me, she was trying to inherit my life's work. Over the next week, I found myself studying her with new eyes. The way she'd light up when discussing home improvement shows. How she'd casually mention how much bigger houses were selling for in our neighborhood. The real estate magazines I'd started finding in David's car. She'd been planning this for months, maybe since the day she met my son. A 77-year-old widower living alone in a valuable house. I must have looked like the perfect target. Marry the son, eliminate the father, inherit the property. But Ashley had made one crucial mistake. She'd underestimated me. 77 years old doesn't mean stupid or helpless. It means experienced. It means patient. It means having survived long enough to recognize danger when it's sitting at your dinner table with a sweet smile and a bottle of poison in her purse. If Ashley wanted to play games with life and death, I was about to teach her the rules. The next Sunday dinner was going to be very different from what she expected. I spent that week planning my response, and by Saturday night I knew exactly what I was going to do. Ashley had been slowly poisoning me for months, watching me suffer, probably hoping each dose would be the one that finally killed me. Tomorrow she was going to discover how it felt to be on the receiving end. Sunday arrived grey and cold, matching my mood perfectly. I'd barely slept, running through my plan over and over, making sure I hadn't missed anything. By the time David called to confirm dinner, I was ready. Looking forward to Ashley's cooking, I told him, the lies sliding off my tongue easier than I'd expected. Tell her I'm bringing my appetite. What I was really bringing was a tiny camera, no bigger than a button, that I'd ordered online and picked up from a friend who understood electronics. Harold from the Veterans Center had helped me set it up, no questions asked. It was hidden in my shirt pocket, positioned to record whatever happened in that kitchen. I arrived at 5:30, my usual time. Ashley greeted me with her typical enthusiasm, standing on her tiptoes to kiss my cheek. She smelled like vanilla and something floral, perfume that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Grandpa Mike, perfect timing. I made your favorite, beef stew with fresh biscuits. My stomach turned, but I managed to smile. You spoil me, sweetheart. David appeared from the living room, beer in hand, looking relaxed and happy. My son had no idea he was married to a would-be killer. The thought of what this revelation would do to him made my chest ache, but there was no other way. Dad, you look good. Color in your cheeks. Clean living, I replied, accepting the beer he offered, and your wife's excellent cooking. Ashley practically glowed at the compliment. Dinner will be ready in 15 minutes. David, can you set the table? I want to add some final touches to the stew. This was it, my moment. Mind if I use your bathroom? I asked, already heading toward the hallway. Of course, Grandpa Mike. You know where it is. I walked down the hall but stopped at the linen closet, positioning myself where I could see into the kitchen through the doorway. David was in the dining room, clattering plates and silverware. Ashley was alone at the stove, stirring a large pot with her back to me. I pressed the record button on my hidden camera and waited. Ashley ladled stew into 3 bowls, her movements efficient and practiced. She served David's bowl first, then her own. Finally, she reached for the 3rd bowl. Mine. Instead of ladling stew directly, she set the bowl aside and reached for her purse on the counter. The same amber bottle appeared in her hand. This time, I could see the label, though I couldn't read it from this distance. Ashley glanced toward the dining room, confirming David was still busy, then unscrewed the cap. She shook the bottle over my bowl. Once, twice, 3 times. Whatever was coming out was powder or tiny crystals, dissolving quickly into the hot stew. She stirred it carefully with a clean spoon, then ladled the stew on top, covering any evidence of what she'd added. The whole process took maybe 20 seconds. 20 seconds of premeditated attempted murder, all captured on my hidden camera. Ashley capped the bottle and dropped it back into her purse, then picked up all 3 bowls to carry to the dining room. I quickly ducked into the bathroom, flushed the toilet, and ran water in the sink to provide cover for my absence. When I emerged, Ashley was already seated at the table, her face bright with anticipation. "There you are. I was starting to worry you'd fallen asleep in there." "Just taking my time," I said, settling into my usual chair. The bowl of stew sat in front of me, steam rising from its surface. It looked delicious and smelled even better. Ashley was an excellent cook, I had to give her that. Even her murder weapon was appetizing. David was already eating, complimenting Ashley on the seasoning. She watched him with obvious pleasure, then turned her attention to me. "Try it, Grandpa Mike. I used a new recipe I found online." I lifted the spoon to my lips, pretending to blow on it to cool it down. "Smells wonderful." "I put extra care into yours," she said, her eyes locked on my face. "I know how much you love beef stew." Extra poison, she meant. How much was she giving me this time? Enough to finally finish the job? I took a tiny sip, just enough to wet my lips, then set the spoon down. "Hot. Let me let it cool a minute." Ashley's smile flickered slightly. "Of course. Take your time." But I could see the impatience in her eyes. She wanted me to eat. Needed me to eat. How long had she been planning to escalate the dosage? How many more Sunday dinners had she calculated it would take? We chatted about David's work, the weather, neighborhood gossip, normal family dinner conversation, except one member of the family was waiting for another member to die. Every few minutes, Ashley would glance at my barely touched bowl. "Not hungry tonight, Dad?" David asked. "Just enjoying the company," I replied. "Sometimes conversation is better than food." Ashley's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "You need to keep your strength up, Grandpa Mike. You've been looking a little thin lately. Because you've been poisoning me, you evil little snake." "You're probably right," I said, picking up my spoon again. "This really does smell incredible." I took another microscopic taste, making appreciative noises. Ashley relaxed slightly, but I could feel her watching my every movement. She was invested in this, emotionally committed to my death. The realization hit me with fresh horror. This wasn't just about money or inheritance. Ashley was enjoying this. The control, the deception, the slow destruction of another human being. She was a predator, and I'd been her prey for months, but not anymore. "Actually," I said, standing up abruptly, "I'm feeling a bit dizzy. Think I need some fresh air." Concern flooded Ashley's face. Perfectly performed concern. "Oh no. Should David drive you home? Just need to step outside for a minute." "Don't let me interrupt your dinner." I walked to the back door, opened it, and stepped onto the small patio. But instead of getting fresh air, I quickly dumped the entire contents of my bowl into the flower bed beside the steps. Every drop of poisoned stew disappeared into the soil. Then I returned to the kitchen, rinsed my bowl in the sink, and ladled fresh stew directly from the pot. Stew that Ashley hadn't touched with her poison. "Feeling better?" David asked when I returned to the table. "Much better. Must have been a head rush from standing too quickly." Ashley was staring at my refilled bowl with confusion and something that might have been alarm. "You got more stew?" "Mine got cold while I was outside. Hope you don't mind." "Of course not," she said, but her voice sounded strained. "There's plenty." I ate the fresh stew with genuine enjoyment, complimenting Ashley's cooking skills between bites. She picked at her own food, her earlier appetite apparently gone. She kept glancing at my bowl, probably wondering why I wasn't showing any signs of illness. After dinner, I helped David clear the table while Ashley loaded the dishwasher. When she thought no one was looking, I saw her check her purse, confirming the poison bottle was still there. "Wonderful meal," I told her, kissing her cheek goodbye. "Thank you for taking such good care of me." "Always," she replied, but the word came out forced. "Feel better, Grandpa Mike." I drove home with my hands shaking on the steering wheel, not from poison this time, but from adrenaline and fury. I had the evidence I needed, recorded in high definition on my hidden camera. Ashley's calculated attempt to murder me, captured from start to finish. But I wasn't ready to expose her yet. First, I wanted to understand the full scope of her plan. Who else might be involved? How long had she been planning this? And most importantly, what other crimes might she have committed? That night, I transferred the video to my computer and watched it 5 times, studying every detail. Ashley's practiced movements, her careful checking to make sure David was out of sight, the methodical way she measured whatever poison she was using. This wasn't her first time. The confidence, the routine. She'd done this before. Maybe not murder, but something requiring the same kind of deception and planning. I thought about my son sleeping peacefully beside his wife, completely unaware that the woman he loved was a killer. How was I going to tell him? How do you destroy someone's world to save your own life? But I had no choice. Ashley had made this decision when she first opened that poison bottle. She'd chosen money over family, greed over love, murder over patience. Now she was going to learn that some old men don't die as easily as expected, and some secrets have a way of poisoning the people who keep them. Tomorrow, I was going to start building a case that would ensure Ashley never had another chance to hurt anyone. She thought she was playing a game with a helpless old man. She was about to discover she'd been playing with someone who had 77 years of experience in fighting for his life. Monday morning, I called Harold from the Veterans Center. I needed more equipment, and I needed someone I could trust to help me install it without asking too many questions. Harold had served 3 tours in Vietnam and understood the value of gathering intelligence before engaging the enemy. "Mike, you sure about this?" he asked as we sat in his garage workshop, surrounded by tiny cameras and recording devices he'd ordered online. "This is some serious spy stuff." "Dead serious," I replied, and meant it literally. "I need to know everything she's doing, Harold. Every conversation, every phone call, every visitor. This woman is trying to kill me." Harold's weathered hands worked steadily, programming the devices. "Your son know about this?" "Not yet. I need proof first. Solid, undeniable evidence." Over the next 3 days, Harold helped me install cameras throughout David and Ashley's house. We did it while they were both at work. I still had a key from when I used to check on the place during their honeymoon. Tiny cameras in the kitchen, living room, and bedroom. Audio recording devices that could pick up conversations through walls. Everything wireless, everything invisible. "If she's planning to kill you," Harold said as we finished the installation, "she's probably not working alone. Nobody plots murder in complete isolation." He was right. By Thursday, I had my answer. I was reviewing the recordings from the previous night when I heard Ashley on the phone in the bedroom, speaking in a voice I'd never heard before. Low, intimate, nothing like the sweet tone she used with David or me. "I can't keep giving him small doses, Marcus. It's taking too long and I think he's getting suspicious." Marcus, a man's name, not David. "I know we agreed to be patient, but what if he changes his will? What if he decides to leave everything to charity or something? We need to move faster." My blood ran cold. Ashley wasn't just planning my murder. She had an accomplice, a lover from the sound of it. "Friday night," she continued. "David's working late at the office. I'll invite Grandpa Mike for dinner, just the 2 of us. Make it look like he had a heart attack during the meal. The old fool trusts me completely." She paused, listening to whatever Marcus was saying. "Yes, I have enough left in the bottle. Dr. Preston's prescription bottles are perfect. No one ever suspects medicine meant to help someone. And if anyone asks, I'll say I was trying to give him his heart medication when he collapsed." Dr. Preston, I knew that name. Ashley's previous employer, she'd worked as a medical assistant in his practice before marrying David. That's where she'd gotten access to whatever drug she was using to poison me. "Stop worrying, Marcus. By Saturday morning, Michael Thompson will be dead, and we'll be 1 step closer to that house. David will inherit everything, and what's his becomes mine in a few months." A few months. They were planning to eliminate David too once the inheritance was settled. "I love you too," Ashley whispered before hanging up. I sat in my kitchen, staring at the recording device, feeling sick in a way that had nothing to do with poison. Ashley wasn't just a killer. She was a serial killer. She'd married my son planning to murder both of us for our property and whatever life insurance David carried. Friday morning, Ashley called to invite me to dinner. Her voice was bright and cheerful, the perfect, loving daughter-in-law. "David's working late tonight and I hate eating alone. Would you like to come over? I could make that chicken parmesan you love." "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart. What time?" 6:30? That way we can take our time, just enjoy each other's company." Take our time. She wanted to make sure I was good and dead before David came home. "I'll bring dessert," I offered. "Oh, you don't need to do that, Grandpa Mike. I've got everything covered." I bet she did, including my death. I spent Friday afternoon preparing for what Ashley intended to be my last meal, but I had my own plans now. While she thought she was luring me to my death, I was about to turn the tables completely. The key was the laxative I'd purchased that morning, a powerful, fast-acting formula designed for severe constipation. tasteless, odorless, and in large enough doses, guaranteed to cause violent stomach distress. Not fatal, but certainly incapacitating. I arrived at David's house at exactly 6:30, carrying a store-bought pie and my hidden recording equipment. Ashley greeted me with her usual enthusiasm, but I could see something different in her eyes, an excitement that had nothing to do with family dinner. "You look lovely tonight," I told her, and she did. She dressed up for the occasion, a black dress that would be appropriate for a widow. How thoughtful. Thank you. I wanted tonight to be special, just the two of us. We so rarely get to spend time alone together. Because you're usually trying to poison me in front of witnesses. The house smelled incredible. Ashley had outdone herself, preparing what she intended to be my final meal. Chicken parmesan, garlic bread, Caesar salad and wine. Enough food for a celebration. Or a funeral. "This is quite a spread," I said, settling into my usual chair. "What's the occasion?" "Do I need an occasion to cook for my favorite father-in-law?" Ashley's laugh sounded forced to my trained ear. "I just wanted to show you how much you mean to me." She disappeared into the kitchen to put the finishing touches on dinner. Through my hidden cameras, I watched her prepare 2 plates of chicken parmesan. Mine went first, and out came the familiar amber bottle. This time, she didn't measure carefully. She dumped a significant amount of white powder onto my food, stirring it in thoroughly, but I was ready for her. While Ashley was in the kitchen, I quickly switched our wine glasses. She left them on the table while she prepared the plates, and in the 15 seconds she was distracted, I made the swap. Her wine now contained a generous dose of the laxative I'd mixed in beforehand. Ashley returned with our plates, setting mine in front of me with that bright, deadly smile. "Bon appetit, Grandpa Mike." She raised her wine glass in a toast. "To family." "To family," I agreed, clinking my glass against hers. Ashley drank deeply, probably steadying her nerves for what she thought was coming. I pretended to drink while barely wetting my lips. As for dinner, I employed the same strategy I'd used the previous Sunday. I pushed the food around my plate, took tiny bites when Ashley was watching, and used my napkin to dispose of most of it when she looked away. "You're not eating much," Ashley observed after about 10 minutes. "Saving room for that delicious wine," I replied, raising my glass again. Ashley smiled and drank more. She was working on her second glass while I was still nursing my first. The laxative was tasteless, just as the package had promised. 20 minutes into dinner, Ashley started shifting uncomfortably in her chair. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" "Fine," she said quickly, but her face had gone slightly pale. "Just a little warm in here." By 30 minutes, she was gripping the edge of the table. "Actually, I think I need to use the bathroom," she said, standing abruptly. "Of course, take your time." Ashley hurried down the hallway, and I heard the bathroom door slam shut. Then came the sounds. Violent, prolonged, unmistakable sounds of severe gastrointestinal distress. I calmly continued eating my salad, while Ashley's cries of pain echoed through the house. The laxative was working exactly as advertised. She'd be incapacitated for hours, maybe longer depending on how much wine she'd consumed. After 10 minutes, Ashley called weakly from the bathroom. "Grandpa Mike, I think I need help. Something's wrong." I walked to the bathroom door, my voice full of concern. "What can I do, sweetheart? I can't stop being sick. I think I have food poisoning or something. Can you call David?" "Of course." "Should I call an ambulance?" "No." The response was sharp, panicked. "Just David. Tell him to come home." Interesting. Even while suffering, Ashley was concerned about involving medical professionals, probably worried they might find traces of whatever poison she'd been carrying in her system. I called David, explained that Ashley was violently ill, and suggested he come home immediately. Then I called 911. "I think I should call paramedics too," I told Ashley through the bathroom door. "This sounds serious." "Please don't," she pleaded. "I'll be fine. It's just something I ate." But it was too late. I'd already given the dispatcher the address and explained that a young woman was experiencing severe digestive distress of unknown origin. The ambulance arrived before David did. 2 paramedics, a man and woman who looked competent and concerned. Ashley emerged from the bathroom pale, shaking, and barely able to walk. "What did you eat today?" the female paramedic asked as they helped Ashley to the couch. "Just dinner," Ashley whispered. "Chicken parmesan." "Did you eat the same thing?" the male paramedic asked me. "Yes, but I feel fine." Ashley prepared the meal herself. They exchanged glances. Food poisoning that affects only one person eating the same meal is unusual. "We should take her to the hospital for evaluation," the female paramedic said. "This level of distress could indicate something serious." Ashley tried to protest, but she was too weak to argue effectively. As they loaded her onto a stretcher, she looked at me with confusion and something that might have been fear. "I don't understand what happened," she said weakly. "Neither do I, sweetheart, but you're going to be fine." David arrived just as the ambulance was pulling away. He was frantic, demanding to know what had happened. "She got sick during dinner," I explained. "Violently sick. The paramedics thought it was best to take her to the hospital. But you ate the same food and you're fine." "I didn't eat much. Wasn't very hungry tonight." David drove to the hospital immediately, leaving me alone in his house, alone with the evidence of Ashley's murder attempt still sitting on my dinner plate, alone with the hidden cameras that had recorded everything, but most importantly alone with Ashley's purse, which she'd left behind in her rush to the bathroom. Inside, I found exactly what I expected: the amber prescription bottle, labeled as belonging to Dr. Preston's former patient, containing what looked like digoxin, a heart medication that in large doses causes exactly the symptoms I'd been experiencing for months. I photographed the bottle, the label, and the remaining pills, then returned everything to Ashley's purse exactly as I'd found it. By the time David returned from the hospital 3 hours later, I was washing the dinner dishes and acting like the concerned father-in-law I was supposed to be. "How is she?" "They're keeping her overnight for observation. They think it might be severe food poisoning, but they want to run some tests to be sure." David looked exhausted and worried. "This is so strange, Dad. Ashley never gets sick." If only he knew how true that statement was. "Sometimes these things just happen," I said, drying the last plate. "The important thing is that she's getting proper medical care." David nodded, but I could see questions forming in his mind. Questions about how his wife could get violently ill from food that didn't affect me at all. Questions that would lead him closer to the truth I was preparing to reveal. As I drove home that night, I couldn't help but smile. Ashley had planned my death for tonight, but instead she was lying in a hospital bed, probably still suffering from the laxative and wondering what had gone wrong. Her plan had backfired spectacularly, and she didn't even know it yet. But she would soon. Very soon. Saturday morning brought news I'd been hoping for but dreading at the same time. David called me at 7 a.m., his voice strained and confused. "Dad, the hospital found something strange in Ashley's blood work. They want to talk to both of us. Can you meet me there?" "Of course, son. What kind of strange?" "They wouldn't say over the phone, just that they need to discuss their findings with the family." I knew exactly what they'd found. The same poison Ashley had been feeding me for months, now circulating in her own system thanks to our switched wine glasses. The irony was almost poetic. At the hospital, Dr. Martinez, a serious-faced woman in her 50s, led David and me into a small conference room. Ashley was still upstairs, sleeping off the effects of what the medical staff believed was severe food poisoning. "Mr. Thompson," Dr. Martinez began, looking directly at me, "we found traces of digoxin in your daughter-in-law's system. Quite a significant amount, actually." David looked puzzled. "Digoxin? What's that?" "It's a heart medication," I answered, before the doctor could respond. "Very dangerous in large doses." Dr. Martinez nodded. "Exactly. The levels we found would be toxic to someone not prescribed this medication. Can you think of any reason Ashley would have ingested digoxin?" "She doesn't have heart problems," David said quickly. "She's only 26 years old and perfectly healthy. That's what makes this concerning," Dr. Martinez continued. "Digoxin poisoning causes exactly the symptoms Ashley experienced: nausea, vomiting, severe gastrointestinal distress. In higher doses, it can cause heart arrhythmias and death." The room fell silent. I could see David's mind working, trying to process this information. "Doctor," I said carefully, "what would you do if you suspected someone had been deliberately given this medication?" "We'd be required to contact the police," she replied. "Digoxin poisoning doesn't happen accidentally." David's face went white. "You think someone poisoned Ashley?" "It's a possibility we have to consider." I took a deep breath. This was the moment I'd been preparing for, but seeing my son's world about to collapse still broke my heart. "David, I need to tell you something, and you're not going to want to hear it." Over the next hour, I showed David and Dr. Martinez everything. The hidden camera footage of Ashley poisoning my food, the audio recordings of her conversations with Marcus, the prescription bottle I'd found in her purse, the documentation of my symptoms over the past 3 months. David sat in stunned silence as the evidence mounted. His wife wasn't a victim. She was a perpetrator, and she'd been trying to kill his father for months. "This can't be real," he whispered, staring at the video on my phone. "Ashley wouldn't. She couldn't. I'm sorry, son. I know how much you love her." Dr. Martinez was taking notes, her expression growing more serious with each piece of evidence. "Mr. Thompson, we need to contact the authorities immediately. This appears to be attempted murder." "Wait," David said suddenly. "If Ashley was poisoning Dad, how did she end up with digoxin in her system?" I'd been dreading this question, but I'd prepared an answer that was technically truthful. "I switched our wine glasses when she wasn't looking. I suspected she might have put something in my drink." "You switched glasses? So she accidentally poisoned herself?" "It appears that way." What I didn't mention was the laxative I'd added to her wine. That detail seemed unnecessary given the circumstances. 2 hours later, Detective Sarah Williams from the County Sheriff's Department was sitting in the same conference room reviewing my evidence. She was a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who asked pointed questions and took detailed notes. "Mr. Thompson, why didn't you come to us sooner with these suspicions?" "I needed proof," I replied. "Would you have believed me if I'd just said I thought my daughter-in-law was poisoning me?" "Fair point. And you say she mentioned an accomplice named Marcus?" "Marcus, yes. From the conversation I recorded, it sounds like he's her lover and partner in this plan." Detective Williams studied the prescription bottle photographs. "This medication was prescribed to a patient of Dr. Preston's clinic. We'll need to investigate how Ashley gained access to it." David had barely spoken since the initial revelation. He sat slumped in his chair, occasionally shaking his head in disbelief. "Detective," he finally said, "what happens now?" "We'll need to arrest Mrs. Thompson on charges of attempted murder. Given the evidence Mr. Thompson has provided and the digoxin found in her system, we have probable cause." "She's still sedated upstairs," Dr. Martinez interjected. "Probably won't be conscious for another few hours." "That's fine. We'll post an officer outside her room and arrest her when she wakes up." As we left the conference room, David grabbed my arm. "Dad, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Of course. Last night, when Ashley got sick, did you do something to her food or drink?" I looked into my son's eyes, seeing pain and confusion and a desperate need for truth. "David, your wife has been trying to kill me for 3 months. Last night, she planned to give me a fatal dose of poison. I protected myself the only way I could. By poisoning her back? By switching our glasses. She poisoned herself." It wasn't the complete truth, but it was true enough. David nodded slowly, apparently accepting my explanation. "I can't believe I married a killer," he said quietly. "How did I not see it?" "Sociopaths are very good at hiding their true nature," I replied. "Ashley fooled all of us." That afternoon, while Ashley was being arrested in her hospital bed, Detective Williams obtained a search warrant for David's house. They found more evidence than even I had expected. Hidden in Ashley's jewelry box were additional prescription bottles, all stolen from Dr. Preston's clinic. Painkillers, blood pressure medications, anti-anxiety drugs, a virtual pharmacy of potentially lethal substances. More disturbing was a notebook containing detailed plans, not just for my murder, but for David's as well. Ashley had calculated exactly how much insurance money and property value she stood to inherit if both of us died. She'd even researched how long she'd need to wait after my death before arranging David's accident. The notebook also contained Marcus's full name and address, Marcus Chen, Ashley's former co-worker at Dr. Preston's clinic and apparently her lover since before her marriage to David. By evening, both Ashley and Marcus were in custody. The police had found text messages between them discussing the timeline for my murder and their plans to leave town afterward. They'd been planning to disappear to Mexico once the inheritance was settled, leaving David to grieve alone while they lived off our money. Detective Williams called me at home with an update. "Mr. Thompson, we've uncovered evidence of a much larger scheme. Ashley and Marcus have been systematically stealing medications from Dr. Preston's clinic for over a year. We think you might not be their first victim." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "We are reviewing suspicious deaths among Dr. Preston's elderly patients. Patients who died of apparent heart attacks or natural causes, but who had contact with Ashley in the weeks before their deaths. Serial killers. Ashley and Marcus weren't just planning to kill David and me. They'd been practicing on elderly patients who couldn't defend themselves." "How many?" I asked. We're not sure yet. Possibly as many as 6 or 7 over the past 18 months. 7 people. 7 families who'd lost loved ones to Ashley's greed and Marcus's ambition. 7 murders that had gone undetected because no one suspected the sweet medical assistant with the charming smile. The next few days passed in a blur of police interviews, legal consultations and media attention. The story of the young woman who'd tried to poison her elderly father-in-law made headlines throughout the state. Ashley and Marcus's photos appeared on every news station, identified as suspected serial killers who targeted vulnerable elderly patients. David moved back into my house temporarily, unable to face the home he'd shared with Ashley. He barely spoke for the first few days, processing the revelation that his wife of 6 months had been planning his death since their wedding day. I keep thinking about little things, he told me one evening, as we sat on my back porch. How she always asked about your health, how interested she was in your will, how she'd get excited whenever we talked about inheritance laws. You couldn't have known, I said. She was very good at what she did. Too good. The police say she and Marcus might have killed 7 people, Dad. 7 innocent people. But they're stopped now. They can't hurt anyone else. Dr. Preston's clinic was shut down pending investigation. The doctor himself wasn't suspected of direct involvement, but his lax security and poor oversight had enabled Ashley and Marcus to steal medications for over a year. A week later, Detective Williams called with news about Ashley's confession. She's trying to negotiate a plea deal, the detective explained. Claims she was manipulated by Marcus, that the whole thing was his idea. Do you believe her? Not for a second. The evidence shows she was the driving force behind your attempted murder. Marcus was involved, but Ashley was the mastermind. The confession also revealed the full scope of their plan. After killing me, Ashley intended to comfort David through his grief, while slowly introducing the idea that his father's death was suspicious. She would have discovered evidence suggesting I'd been murdered by someone trying to steal my house, probably a fake burglary gone wrong. Then, after David inherited my property and they'd collected the insurance money, Marcus would arrange David's death to look like a car accident or workplace incident. Ashley would be the grieving widow, inheriting everything and disappearing with her lover. It was a sophisticated long-term plan that might have worked if Ashley hadn't underestimated her target. She'd seen a 77-year-old widower and assumed he'd be easy prey. She'd been wrong. The trial was set for the following spring. Ashley and Marcus both faced multiple charges of first-degree murder, attempted murder, theft, and conspiracy. The evidence against them was overwhelming, and their former partnership had dissolved into mutual accusations and blame. But the most satisfying moment came 3 weeks after their arrest, when Detective Williams called with unexpected news. Mr. Thompson, we found something else during our investigation. Ashley has significant gambling debts, over $80,000 owed to various online betting sites. That's probably what motivated the accelerated timeline for your murder. Gambling debts. Ashley hadn't just been greedy, she'd been desperate. The sweet, caring daughter-in-law who'd cooked my Sunday dinners had been facing financial ruin, and my death was her solution. There's something else, Detective Williams continued. Marcus has a previous conviction for insurance fraud in California. He was released from prison just 6 months before he started working at Dr. Preston's clinic. The pieces were falling into place. Marcus had brought the criminal expertise, Ashley had provided access to victims and medications, and together they'd created a killing scheme that had claimed multiple lives. But it was over now. Both of them would spend the rest of their lives in prison, and the families of their victims would finally have justice. As I hung up the phone, I felt something I hadn't experienced in months: complete safety. No more Sunday dinners to dread, no more suspicious symptoms to worry about, no more wondering if each day might be my last. Ashley had tried to inherit my life by taking it away from me. Instead, she'd given me something far more valuable, the satisfaction of knowing that evil doesn't always win, and that sometimes the intended victim gets to watch their would-be killer face the consequences of their choices. Justice, I'd learned, tastes much better than poison. The trial began on a crisp March morning, 8 months after Ashley's arrest. The courthouse was packed with reporters, victims' families, and curious onlookers, drawn by the sensational story of the young woman who'd turned Sunday dinners into murder attempts. David sat beside me in the gallery, looking older than his 32 years. The past months had been difficult for him. Divorce proceedings, therapy sessions, and the painful process of accepting that the woman he'd loved had never really existed. "You don't have to be here for this," I told him, as we waited for the proceedings to begin. "Yes, I do," he replied firmly. "I need to hear everything. I need to understand how I could have been so completely fooled." Ashley entered the courtroom in shackles, wearing an orange jumpsuit that made her look younger and more vulnerable than I remembered. Her transformation from the sweet daughter-in-law to accused serial killer was jarring, even for someone who knew the truth. She glanced toward our section of the gallery, and our eyes met briefly. For a moment, I saw something flicker across her face. Regret, perhaps, or maybe just calculation. Then she looked away, focusing on her attorney. The prosecution's case was devastating and methodical. They presented timeline after timeline, showing how Ashley and Marcus had systematically targeted elderly patients over 18 months. The evidence was overwhelming. Stolen medications, forged prescriptions, suspicious deaths that formed a clear pattern. But it was the recordings I'd captured that truly sealed Ashley's fate. When they played the audio of her conversation with Marcus, planning my Friday night murder, the courtroom fell completely silent. Ashley's voice filled the room, cold and calculating as she discussed accelerating my death. "I can't keep giving him small doses, Marcus. It's taking too long and I think he's getting suspicious." I watched the jury's faces as they listened. 12 ordinary people hearing a 26-year-old woman casually discuss murdering an elderly man for his house. Their expressions ranged from disgust to horror to genuine fear. The video evidence was even more damning. Clear footage of Ashley systematically adding poison to my food, checking to make sure she wasn't being watched, stirring the digoxin into my meals with practiced efficiency. "This isn't the action of someone acting under duress," the prosecutor explained to the jury. "This is the behavior of a predator who views elderly people as obstacles to be removed." Ashley's defense attorney tried to paint her as a victim of Marcus's manipulation, a young woman led astray by an older criminal with experience in fraud and deception. They argued that Marcus had targeted Ashley specifically because of her access to medications and vulnerable patients. But the evidence told a different story. Phone records showed that Ashley had initiated most of the communications with Marcus. Financial records revealed that she'd been accumulating gambling debts long before meeting him. Most damaging of all, they found her personal journal, filled with detailed observations about elderly patients and their family situations. The journal entries were chilling in their clinical detachment. Ashley had evaluated potential victims like a businesswoman assessing investment opportunities, noting their health conditions, family relationships, and estimated net worth. One entry, dated 2 weeks before our first Sunday dinner, read, "Michael Thompson, 77, widowed, owns house worth approximately $400,000. Son David completely trusting, no other family. Perfect target if I can gain access through marriage." She'd planned to marry David specifically to get close to me. Their entire relationship had been a calculated step in her murder scheme. The prosecution called Dr. Martinez to testify about the night Ashley was hospitalized with digoxin poisoning. Her testimony established the medical facts clearly. The levels of poison found in Ashley's system were consistent with someone who had been handling the substance regularly and had accidentally ingested a significant dose. The defendant's symptoms were severe but not fatal, Dr. Martinez explained. However, the same amount given to a 77-year-old man with a smaller body mass could easily have been lethal. When it came time for victim impact statements, the families of Ashley and Marcus's other victims shared heartbreaking stories. Elderly people who died alone, their deaths attributed to natural causes until the investigation revealed the truth. Mrs. Henderson, whose 82-year-old husband had been one of their victims, spoke through tears. Robert trusted everyone. He would have offered Ashley a cup of coffee and invited her to sit down while she killed him. These people preyed on the kindness and vulnerability of our elderly loved ones. David was called to testify about his relationship with Ashley and his observations of our family dinners. Watching my son on the witness stand forced to dissect his marriage in front of strangers was one of the most difficult moments of the entire ordeal. "Did your wife ever express unusual interest in your father's health or financial situation?" the prosecutor asked. "She seemed very caring about Dad's well-being," David replied carefully. "She always wanted to make sure he ate well, that he was taking care of himself. I thought she was being a good daughter-in-law. Did she ever discuss inheritance or your father's will?" David's voice became quieter. "Sometimes." She'd mentioned how important it was for families to plan ahead, to make sure everything was in order. I thought she was just being practical. The defense attorney tried to portray David as an unreliable witness, suggesting that his anger over the divorce had colored his perceptions. But David's testimony was measured and factual, focusing on observable behaviors rather than emotional reactions. When I was called to testify, I felt the weight of every person in that courtroom watching me. This was my chance to speak for all of Ashley's victims, not just myself, but the elderly patients who couldn't speak for themselves anymore. I told the jury about the months of illness, the growing suspicion, and the night I finally witnessed Ashley poisoning my food. I described the recordings I'd made and the evidence I'd gathered, painting a picture of systematic, premeditated murder attempts. "Why didn't you go to the police immediately after witnessing the defendant poison your food?" Ashley's attorney asked during cross-examination. "Because I needed to understand the full scope of what she was doing," I replied. "I suspected she wasn't working alone, and I wanted to make sure all the responsible parties were caught. So you took the law into your own hands." I protected myself while gathering evidence of ongoing crimes. I prevented my own murder, and possibly the murders of future victims. The attorney pressed harder. "Isn't it true that you deliberately poisoned the defendant's wine with laxatives?" I paused, knowing this was the moment I'd been preparing for since the investigation began. "I switched our wine glasses when I suspected she had put something in my drink. The defendant poisoned herself with the same substance she'd been using to try to kill me for months." It was true as far as it went. I didn't mention the laxatives, and no one had thought to test for them during Ashley's hospital stay. Sometimes the complete truth isn't necessary for justice to be served. The most compelling testimony came from Marcus during the prosecution's case. Facing multiple life sentences, he'd agreed to testify against Ashley in exchange for a plea deal that would spare him the death penalty. Marcus painted Ashley as the driving force behind their killing spree, describing how she'd approached him with the idea of targeting elderly patients for their medications and assets. According to his testimony, Ashley had been stealing drugs from Dr. Preston's clinic for months before they'd started working together. She had it all planned out, Marcus testified, which patients were most vulnerable, how to access their homes, what medications would cause the least suspicion. Ashley was smart, scary smart about this stuff. "Who decided to target Michael Thompson specifically?" the prosecutor asked. "That was all Ashley. She said marrying his son would give her perfect access and nobody would suspect a family member. She was excited about it like it was some kind of game." Ashley's reaction to Marcus's testimony was visible from across the courtroom. Her composed facade cracked, and for the first time since the trial began, she looked genuinely angry. She whispered urgently to her attorney, apparently upset that her former partner was portraying her as the mastermind. The trial lasted 3 weeks. Expert witnesses testified about digoxin poisoning, the pattern of deaths at Dr. Preston's clinic, and the psychological profile of someone capable of systematic murder. The evidence was overwhelming, but I could see the defense attorney working hard to create reasonable doubt about Ashley's role as the primary instigator. During closing arguments, the prosecutor painted a clear picture of Ashley as a cold-blooded killer who targeted vulnerable elderly people for financial gain. The defendant didn't just plan to kill Michael Thompson, the prosecutor told the jury. She planned to kill his son as well, inheriting hundreds of thousands of dollars and disappearing with her lover. This wasn't a crime of passion or desperation. It was a calculated business plan with murder as the primary strategy. The defense attorney made one final attempt to portray Ashley as a victim of manipulation, arguing that Marcus had been the experienced criminal who'd led her into increasingly serious crimes. Ashley Thompson was a young woman who made terrible choices under the influence of a manipulative older man, the attorney argued. She deserves punishment, but not the ultimate punishment reserved for the worst criminals in our society. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. When they returned to the courtroom, Ashley stood to hear the verdict, her face pale but composed. On the charge of first-degree murder in the death of Robert Henderson, we find the defendant guilty. The words hit the courtroom like physical blows. Guilty on all 7 counts of first-degree murder. Guilty of attempted murder in my case. Guilty of conspiracy, theft, and fraud. Ashley remained standing as the verdicts were read, but I could see her hands shaking. The young woman who'd smiled so sweetly while poisoning my Sunday dinners was facing life in prison without the possibility of parole. Marcus had already been sentenced to life with the possibility of parole after 25 years in exchange for his testimony. Ashley would likely spend the rest of her life behind bars. As the court session ended and Ashley was led away in shackles, she turned one final time toward our section of the gallery. This time she looked directly at David, her expression unreadable. David stared back for a moment, then stood and walked out of the courtroom without looking back. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded us with questions about how it felt to see justice served. I kept my answers brief and focused on the other victims' families who'd finally gotten closure. But privately, I felt a deep satisfaction that had nothing to do with revenge and everything to do with protection. Ashley would never hurt another elderly person. She would never manipulate another trusting family member. She would never turn a Sunday dinner into a murder attempt. The young woman who'd tried to inherit my life had instead inherited a lifetime of consequences for her choices, and sometimes that's exactly how justice is supposed to work. 2 years after Ashley's conviction, I stood in the kitchen of my new home, preparing Sunday dinner for my family. But this Sunday was different from those dark months when every meal could have been my last. This Sunday was filled with genuine love, honest laughter, and the kind of peace that only comes after surviving something that was meant to destroy you. David arrived at exactly 5 o'clock, carrying flowers and a bottle of wine, a tradition we'd started after I moved to the senior living community across town. He looked healthier than he had in months, the haunted expression finally gone from his eyes. "How are you settling in, Dad?" he asked, surveying my new apartment with approval. "Better than I expected," I replied honestly. "It's nice having neighbors again, people to talk to, and the security here makes me feel safe." Safety had become more important to me than I'd realized. The community had electronic key cards, security cameras, and staff who knew every resident personally. No one could slip poison into my food here without multiple witnesses. David helped me finish preparing dinner. Nothing fancy, just roast chicken and vegetables. Simple food that I'd prepared myself in my own kitchen with ingredients I'd personally selected and watched throughout the cooking process. After months of fearing every meal, cooking had become a form of meditation for me. "Have you heard anything about Ashley lately?" David asked as we sat down to eat. I nodded. "Detective Williams called last week. Ashley's appeal was denied. She'll be spending the rest of her life in prison." David was quiet for a moment, processing this information. He'd struggled with conflicting emotions about his ex-wife, anger at her betrayal mixed with grief for the woman he'd thought he loved. "Do you ever wonder what would have happened if you hadn't caught her that night?" he asked. "I try not to think about it," I replied. "But probably I'd be dead, and you'd be next on her list." It was a sobering thought. Ashley's journal had contained detailed plans for David's murder, scheduled to take place 6 months after mine. She'd calculated exactly how long she needed to wait to avoid suspicion, how to make his death look accidental, and where she and Marcus planned to disappear afterward. "I keep thinking I should have seen the signs," David said, echoing a conversation we'd had many times over the past 2 years. "She was very good at what she did," I reminded him. "The FBI profiler said that sociopaths like Ashley can maintain false personalities for years without detection. You weren't supposed to see through her act." The psychological evaluation conducted during Ashley's trial had revealed a disturbing profile. She showed no genuine remorse for her victims, only regret at being caught. Her tears during the trial had been performed for the jury's benefit, another manipulation attempt from someone who viewed other people as obstacles or resources rather than human beings. Marcus, by contrast, had shown some capacity for genuine emotion during his testimony. He'd seemed genuinely horrified by some of Ashley's suggestions, particularly her plans to kill David. The FBI profiler believed that Marcus had been manipulated by Ashley almost as much as her other victims, though he was still responsible for his choices and actions. "I've been seeing someone," David said, suddenly changing the subject. I looked up from my dinner, surprised. David hadn't mentioned dating anyone since his divorce was finalized. "Her name is Jennifer. She's a teacher at the elementary school. We met at a community picnic last month." "How do you feel about that?" I asked carefully. David's trust in relationships had been shattered by Ashley's betrayal. "Scared," he admitted. "Terrified, actually. But Jennifer knows about everything that happened. She was very understanding when I told her about Ashley and the trial. That's a good sign, honesty from the beginning. She wants to meet you," David continued. "If you're comfortable with that." I smiled. "I'd like that. But David, You know I'm going to be suspicious of anyone you bring around for a while. I know, and I appreciate that. I need someone watching out for red flags because I obviously can't trust my own judgment. We finished dinner and moved to the living room, where I showed David the photo albums I'd been organizing, pictures from his childhood, his mother's life, family vacations and holidays from better times. It felt important to remember the good memories, to not let Ashley's poison contaminate everything. Look at this one, I said, pointing to a photo of David's 8th birthday party. Your mother made that cake from scratch. Took her all day, and it was lopsided. But you thought it was the most beautiful thing you'd ever seen. David studied the photo, smiling at the memory. I remember. She was so proud of that cake. She would have seen right through Ashley, I said quietly. Your mother had excellent instincts about people. We spent the evening looking through photos and sharing memories. It was peaceful in a way that our family gatherings hadn't been for years, not since Ashley had entered our lives with her poisoned meals and false affection. Around 9 o'clock, David prepared to leave. As he was putting on his coat, he turned to me with a serious expression. Dad, I want you to know something. What you did, the way you protected us both, that took incredible courage and intelligence. I'm proud to be your son. The words hit me harder than I'd expected. Throughout the investigation and trial, I'd focused on justice and safety. I hadn't thought much about courage. I was terrified the entire time, I admitted. I kept thinking about what would happen if she realized I knew, if she decided to accelerate her timeline. But you did it anyway. You saved both our lives. After David left, I sat in my comfortable chair looking out at the garden visible from my apartment window. Other residents were taking evening walks, chatting on benches, living their lives without fear. It was a community of people who'd earned their peace through decades of work and sacrifice. I thought about Ashley, probably lying on a narrow prison bunk at that very moment, facing the reality of spending the rest of her life paying for her choices. I felt no satisfaction in her suffering, but I felt profound relief that she could never hurt anyone else. The next morning, I received an unexpected phone call from Detective Williams. Mr. Thompson, I wanted to let you know that Ashley's case has led to a broader investigation of suspicious deaths in nursing homes and assisted living facilities across the state. Your evidence and testimony have potentially saved dozens of lives. How so? We've identified a pattern of healthcare workers who've been systematically targeting elderly patients. Ashley and Marcus weren't operating in isolation. There appears to be a network of people sharing information and techniques for exploiting vulnerable elderly people. The news was both encouraging and disturbing. Encouraging because my ordeal had led to protecting other potential victims. Disturbing because it revealed how widespread this type of predatory behavior had become. We're implementing new protocols for monitoring medication access and investigating suspicious deaths, Detective Williams continued. Your case has become a training example for law enforcement agencies across the country. After hanging up, I felt a sense of purpose I hadn't experienced in years. My survival hadn't just saved David and me, it had exposed a broader criminal network and led to protections for vulnerable elderly people nationwide. That afternoon, I received another unexpected call. This one was from a publisher who'd heard about my story through the media coverage of Ashley's trial. Mr. Thompson, we'd like to discuss the possibility of you writing a book about your experience. Not sensationalizing it, but providing practical advice for elderly people and their families about recognizing the warning signs of elder abuse. I was intrigued by the idea. Throughout the investigation and trial, I'd met many families who'd lost elderly relatives to suspicious circumstances. They'd shared stories of subtle signs they'd missed, small changes in behavior that might have indicated abuse or exploitation. What kind of book are you thinking about? I asked. A survival guide, essentially. How to protect yourself and your loved ones from predators who target elderly people. Your experience gives you unique insights into how these criminals operate and how they can be stopped. Over the following months, I worked with a ghostwriter to document not just my own experience, but the broader patterns of elder abuse that the investigation had revealed. The book, titled Sunday Dinners and Survival: An Elderly Man's Guide to Staying Safe, became a resource for families across the country. More importantly, the writing process helped me find meaning in my trauma. Every word I wrote was a weapon against people like Ashley and Marcus, arming potential victims with knowledge and suspicion that could save their lives. David's relationship with Jennifer progressed slowly, but steadily. When I finally met her 6 months later, I was prepared to be suspicious and protective. Instead, I found myself genuinely liking her straightforward manner and obvious affection for my son. "David told me about everything that happened with Ashley," Jennifer said during our first dinner together. "I want you to know that I understand why you might be cautious about trusting new people in his life." "I appreciate your understanding," I replied. "I also want you to know that I've read your book and I think what you did was remarkable. You saved not just your own life, but probably dozens of other lives as well." Jennifer was nothing like Ashley. Where Ashley had been performatively sweet, Jennifer was genuinely kind. Where Ashley had been calculating, Jennifer was transparent. Most importantly, Jennifer encouraged David's relationship with me rather than trying to drive a wedge between us. A year later, David and Jennifer were engaged. Their wedding was a small, intimate ceremony held in the garden of my senior living community. As I watched my son exchange vows with a woman who truly loved him, I felt a peace that had nothing to do with survival and everything to do with hope. During his wedding toast, David raised his glass to me. "To my father, who taught me that true strength isn't about being fearless. It's about being afraid and doing what's right anyway. Dad, thank you for saving my life in more ways than you'll ever know." The guests raised their glasses, but I was thinking about something else entirely. I was thinking about the other families at that reception, elderly parents and grandparents who were loved and protected by their children and grandchildren, people who would never have to fear that their Sunday dinner might be their last meal. That night, as I sat in my apartment looking through the wedding photos, I realized something profound. Ashley had tried to steal my life, but instead, she'd given me something more valuable than mere survival. She'd given me purpose, community, and the satisfaction of knowing that sometimes the intended victim gets to write the ending to their own story. I was 79 years old, living independently in a secure community, with a son who loved and respected me, and a daughter-in-law who genuinely cared about my well-being. I'd written a book that was helping protect other elderly people from predators. I had friends, activities, and a future worth looking forward to. Ashley had tried to inherit my life by ending it. Instead, I'd inherited hers, trading her freedom for my safety, her future for my peace of mind, her calculated cruelty for genuine human connections. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. Sometimes it's simply living well, surrounded by people who love you for who you are, rather than what you own. And sometimes, the person who tries to poison your Sunday dinner ends up poisoning only their own future. As I turned off the lights that night, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years: complete contentment. Tomorrow would bring another day of simple pleasures: coffee with neighbors, a good book, maybe a phone call from David and Jennifer. Simple pleasures that Ashley would never experience again, because she'd chosen poison over patience, greed over gratitude, murder over the possibility of earning love honestly. It was a choice she'd have the rest of her life to regret. I, on the other hand, had the rest of my life to appreciate